Hello, my name is Maura de Freitas, and I'm very pleased to be speaking today with Eamonn McKee, Ireland's new ambassador to Canada, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. A little background: Eamonn graduated from UCD with a degree in history and economics in 1982, followed by a PhD from the National University of Ireland in 1987 for a thesis on Irish economic policy, 1939 to 1952. He joined the Department of Foreign Affairs in 1986 and worked in the Anglo-Irish division, which would become the focus of his work for the following 20 years, including 6 years at the Embassy of Washington from 1990 to 1996. He writes that professionally, Washington was incredibly fulfilling, involving, as it did, engagement with Congress on immigration reform and the Clinton White House on the emerging Northern Ireland peace process. Professional and private life crossed when he met Congressman Bruce Morrison's legislative staffer, Mary Ray McGillis, while lobbying for Irish visas. Ireland got the visas, and Eamonn found a wife. And later, they were blessed with 3 wonderful children. He served twice more in the Anglo-Irish division focused on security issues, including Bloody Sunday, contentious parades, policing, and confidence in the rule of law and the use of lethal force, the Corey process, and criminal justice reform. He was honored to be a member of the Irish government's talks team that negotiated the Good Friday Agreement and was later involved in its implementation on policies and the justice agenda. He served 2 more years as press officer at the Consulate General in New York. From 2004, he served in Irish Aid and as UN Director and founding director of the Conflict Resolution Unit. He served previously as ambassador to Seoul in 2009 to 2013, and Israel 2013 to 2015. And he took up as Director General of Trade and the Promotion Division in August 2015. And he's been blogging for a number of years, and readers can view his blog on www.eamonnmckee.com. Welcome, Ambassador McKee.
Thank you, Maura.
Thank you. So since the welcome to Canada, first of all, and since the mid-1800s, the Irish have a long history in Canada, mostly in Eastern Canada, with a large presence in both Quebec and Ontario. But in recent years, as you know, there's been a large shift to Western Canada, and this was recognized by the Government of Ireland when a new Consulate General was established here in Vancouver. And this team, led by Consul General Frank Flood, has been warmly welcomed here in Vancouver. So could you speak a bit about what your additional outreach and communication plans are across Canada as we move forward in this time of COVID-19, maybe in terms of technology?
Yeah, Maura, well, first of all, just to say as well that, Irish immigration to Canada, as you know, got a boost after the financial crisis, and a lot of new Irish came to Vancouver and Toronto and elsewhere and across Canada. And I think that's been great to see. It's given a great boost to relations between Canada and Ireland. And in a way, Canada looms now quite large as a source of immigration for particularly young Irish, and some will obviously come for the jobs. Some will come for a sense of adventure, for exploring the world before ultimately returning to Ireland. But it's fantastic to see that infusion of new energy and new life into the relationship between Ireland and Canada. And I think that relationship has been growing from strength to strength. And I'd like to pay a tribute to my predecessor, Jim Kelly, and the team at the embassy. I mean, they really did a great job outreaching, but also building the bridge between Ireland and Canada. I think from 2017 to 2020, we had something well over 20 high-level visits, including 2 Taoiseach and ministers. And those kind of visits are really, really important. And as you say, we set up the consulate in Vancouver with Frank and Jennifer over there. And I think, doing that was a recognition that, well, Canada is a very big country, and, Vancouver and British Columbia and Alberta is a stretch, but we had a vibrant Irish community there, and huge opportunities to build relations with the vibrant part of Canada. I'm also, very happy to see that Toronto and a consulate in Toronto is on the cards in terms of the Global Ireland strategy. But in a way, the real Irish presence in Canada is the Irish community here, which, as you say, has been an historic fact of life in Canada, made a huge contribution to Canada. And, the one thing that strikes me, as I settle into the job, is just the number of Irish communities across Canada, doing a range of different things, from St. Patrick's Day to Irish study programs to business networks, and of course outreach and support to Irish communities and Irish immigrant communities, and indeed individual Irish immigrants. We sometimes have to, well, we certainly have to remember that immigration is not necessarily an easy thing to do. It can be challenging. You're going to a whole new country. It may look familiar. People may speak English. Not all of them, of course, here in Canada, but it's different. It's a different culture, and you can be a bit surprised by how different it is. It's a whole challenge, leaving family behind and so on. It's quite a challenge, and you have to admire people who take that step. But one thing that's been tremendous for us in the embassy is that sometimes when people do need help, if they're lost a job or between jobs, or they're feeling lonely, which you can't, inevitably you do, you miss home and you miss familiar faces, familiar surroundings. The Irish outreach organizations in British Columbia and in Toronto and across Canada have been absolutely amazing. And I think you could see it as well in COVID. COVID just added a whole other layer of uncertainty and trauma for people. Some had to make a tough decision, to go home. Many stayed, of course. But it was a whole other ball game. And I'd like to pay tribute to all of the immigrant support services and people that have been such a help to us since the outbreak of COVID. And it was tremendous to have that there before we had the crisis hit. But it's been a tremendous source of support. Just to come to your question, listen, we're all dealing with the new environment and new technology. You and I would probably normally have this meeting and interview face to face, but we're doing it this way. And it's been great to see other platforms being used. The Irish Canada Immigration Centre in Toronto, for example, doing some fabulous podcasts. The broadcasting, Maura, that you're doing, all helps to link people, let them know what's going on, and importantly, to let them know what help is there should they need it. And I think we're just going to see more of that. Even if COVID was sorted out tomorrow, I think we're still going to use this technology. It's accelerated our use and familiarity with it. But I think we're all hoping for the day we can get back to normal and meet people. Now it's a thrill to actually meet somebody, even socially distanced, just to meet somebody, and that reminds us of how valuable that whole experience is.
Exactly.
But people are innovating.
Exactly.
GA clubs, for example, are innovating with their outreach and help to people. So I think we're all exploring creatively how to do this.
New platforms. Well, this brings me to my next question, actually. And here in British Columbia, the Irish Benevolent Society of BC is administering a COVID-19 food voucher program in collaboration with the Irish Consulate. And this is thanks to a grant from the Exceptional Emergency Fund with the Government of Ireland. Are there any additional steps planned to support issues of isolation? Many Irish immigrants are battling homesickness, and many have never felt further from home. And I'm thinking particularly of the young newcomers on working visas, and the Irish elderly who are struggling with technology right now.
Yeah, well, we remain actively in touch with all of the support organizations, and you'll know John, Deputy Head of Mission here, and Laura Findlay as well as Frank and Jennifer. So we are constantly in touch with all of these organizations and lending support to them in any way that we can. As you know, the Immigrant Support Program is a source of funding, And that's been available for a number of years, and we're happy to continue that. We've also had some additional funding from COVID support funds set up back in Ireland. So it's really a question of just refining those proposals where we can support them. Sometimes it's finance, sometimes it's just turning up and participating in these events. And we do outreach, and Laura has been very active in this outreach, for example, to the older immigrant communities. It was one, I understand, it was one of the great things, for example, for the older Irish community here to come to the residence. That's not possible at the moment, unfortunately, but we are outreaching to them using webinars and seminars. But listen, if anybody has a proposal that they want us to support, they should get in touch with us through their organizations or directly with us, and we're very happy to look at that, you know.
I think that's great. You know, tomorrow, for instance, there's an Irish seniors event across Canada for the Day of Celebrating Elders. I think that's a wonderful initiative. That's just one example.
Yeah.
So I'll move on to one of my favorite subjects these days, and maybe not one of your favorites, Brexit, which is looming large in the news. I know that Simon Coveney is in New York today, or Washington. He's in the United States anyway, discussing Brexit.
That's right.
This has created a great deal of uncertainty in Ireland. The transition period for Britain to leave the European Union is set December 31 this year. And at the present time, there's still negotiations with the EU and the UK to negotiate a future relationship. This is further complicated by last-minute changes to the withdrawal agreement, an international treaty that was ratified in the UK Parliament in January of this year, after 4 years of negotiation. And this ensured an open border between Ireland, north and south. So what is the potential impact on the Good Friday Agreement and the Northern Ireland peace process with these changes?
Yeah, thanks, Maura. I mean, we've been dealing with this obviously since Brexit arrived on the scene and the word was coined, and I think we all had that sinking feeling that Brexit is going to be part of our vocabulary for the foreseeable. You know, we don't think it's a good idea, and we have taken steps to preserve the Good Friday Agreement and the peace process in Northern Ireland, and I pay tribute to Taoiseach Kenny, who immediately recognised that Brexit was indeed a threat to the Northern Ireland peace process and the institutions we've set up and the progress that we've made. And if I just go back a little bit, I think we have to remember as well that the peace process really had its origins in the European Union itself. The single market meant that the border, apart from security checks, the border was open. And John Hume, with kind of strategic insight and genius, realized that if the issue was the border, and there was no border within the single market, then what were we fighting about? Obviously, there were still issues about the administration of justice, there were sovereignty issues, there were other things we could deal with. But at the end of the day, the peace process was founded on the idea that within a single market of the European Union, there was no border on the island of Ireland for anybody to see. And indeed, you know, once we got rid of the security towers and security checks and so on, you know, you'd have to pay very close attention to figure out when you were crossing the border. You could generally figure it out by looking at the paint on the side of the road. That was it. There was literally no border left anymore. And then we solved other issues. We had an all-island vote on the Good Friday Agreement, which was a really important expression of national sovereignty, which we hadn't got when Ireland was partitioned in 1921. And so when Brexit comes along and Britain decides to take itself out of the single market, you immediately have this prospect of there being a border, a land border, because obviously Northern Ireland would represent a border with the EU. So Enda Kenny went on a diplomatic initiative supported by officials from the Department of Taoiseach and indeed from my own department to put that on the agenda, and he did that very successfully. And in fact, anytime we've had senior officials come from Brussels to Ireland, you know, my department would take them up to places on the border and places like Auckland and say, are you serious about trying to put a border here? Because the reality is, it is not possible. It is not physically possible to have a border on the island of Ireland. The notional border we did have, ran across natural boundaries, through houses and cowsheds and over ditches and through rivers. It's just not physically possible to do that. As you say, we negotiated for many years on the withdrawal agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol. We had that agreed, and now we're all a little bit taken aback by the internal market bill, which, as you know, has passed through the House of Commons and is going to the House of Lords at a date to be decided. But we're very taken aback by this, and I think it's fair to say there was a sharp intake of breath, because the internal market bill proposes withdrawing from selected parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which guarantees no border. We'll have to see. We are entering a very uncertain period over the next few months in terms of coming up with a withdrawal agreement. But the Irish government's position is very clear. We want as strong an economic relationship as we can have with Britain, and that means as few barriers to trade as possible. The European Union shares that view. Obviously, you have to do it within agreed principles, such as the level playing field. Everybody's operating under the same business conditions and no unfair advantages and so on. State aid rules are another important part of it. But yeah, it's very disruptive, and we've dealt with it, I think, as best we can so far. But we have a duty of hope that we can come up with a deal that everybody can live with and preserves the gains you've got in the peace process, and we don't end up with a border on the island of Ireland. It's as simple as that.
I can't imagine that anybody would want to return. I remember the times when there were checkpoints and border checks and armed guards on the borders, and it wasn't a happy time for anybody, north or south.
No, a million people live either side of the border, and while the main artery for commerce is the Dublin to Belfast road, and most traffic across the border happens in the west, around Donegal, Derry, Strabane. People, go across that border without even realizing it's just like walking down the street, and it's simply not possible to police that and try to reimpose it. It's simply not possible. Like I say, 90% of the traffic happens amongst ordinary people going to schools and jobs and relatives and whatnot. So yeah, that's really the what we need to protect. I mean, I remember being up in a couple of years ago, up meeting some old contacts from my time on the peace process, and met a woman who lived in Newry, very middle of the road, and she said, listen, she says, was never political. I didn't get involved in hunger strikes, nothing to do with that. Just want to get people on, let people get on with their lives. She says, but she said, the prospect of a return to a border, she says, fills me with rage. I cannot imagine people going back and reestablishing a border. I mean, I'd say it's like trying to put the border back down in the middle of Germany. I mean, it's inconceivable, So, but I mean, I'd like to reassure your listeners, the Irish government is absolutely working in lockstep with the European Union. We're absolutely determined to prioritize the preservation of peace in Northern Ireland. And I think Britain is too. I genuinely do believe that they don't want to go back either. I think Britain is trying to carve out an economic future for itself, and that's what's motivating it. You can agree or disagree with it. I don't think it makes a lot of economic sense from my point of view, but they seem to think it does. But so I don't think there's ill intent there. But I think we just have to avoid unintended consequences or intended consequences, whatever it may be. But we preserve the peace that we've achieved, and try to keep,
Exactly.
a vibrant economic relationship with Britain.
I don't think it's in anybody's interests to go back to the past. So during this transition period, the UK remains subject to EU law, and it remains part of the EU customs union and the single market. Without a trade deal in place by the end of December, there are very serious economic implications for Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, we are staring into the unknown here in the absence of a deal, and we are we were at this position last year, but we had a buffer of a year, the transition. We don't have that anymore. I mean, Britain is technically out of the European Union right now, and it's in this strange transition period where things don't seem to have changed. But it's a bit like an aircraft running out of fuel. It flies right up until the point it runs out of fuel, and this is kind of where we're at with this, that come the end of this year, we are into a different situation. I mean, listen, the pattern here has been kind of brinksmanship and coming up to the edge and then doing a deal at the end. And I think that's what we're all bending our efforts towards, getting some kind of a deal that allows goods to flow, that we don't end up with shortages and miles of lorries waiting to cross and so on and so forth. It really is an appalling prospect. But that's what we have to focus on is avoiding that and getting some kind of a deal. And so far, we've always managed that. And if you look, just to look back to the peace process, very often people said it wasn't possible. But if you bend your efforts to it, and there's goodwill on all sides, we should be able to get there.
Well, there is hope. CETA, otherwise known as the Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, has been a huge boost to trade development between Ireland and Canada. To what extent can increased trade with Canada soften the impact of Brexit?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll come back to that in a second, but just to remember that Ireland is now a very globalized economy. Yep. We are exporting around the world. Our dependence on Britain has greatly reduced from, it was almost total dependence after, throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's now been reduced. I think our trade is something like 14%. So we're not hugely dependent on Britain for our economic welfare. And we have, top global companies exporting out of Ireland: pharmaceuticals, services, high tech, med tech, communications, financial services. But I think what CETA has, as you say, been a tremendous boost to trade relations between Europe and Canada. I think we're obviously focused here on building the trade relationship between Canada and Ireland. I think there's huge potential in that we haven't yet explored. It's very vibrant at the moment, but there's an awful lot more we could do and find areas to cooperate in, that's been part of the discussions in my outreach to people in Canada. Financial services. There are some Canadian banks and companies in Dublin, but there could be an awful lot more. We've already had one big Canadian company move from London to Ireland so they stay within the European Union. That's now a comparative advantage, not one we asked for, but Britain has given us this advantage. So financial services, I think there's a lot we could do there. Cooperation on agriculture. You take, Saskatchewan and Alberta, amazing places for the quality of their agriculture, the extent of that, and we've been very successful on a much smaller scale, but very successful in terms of our agriculture. There's innovation. R&D is very important to a lot of the provinces now in terms of their economic development, and R&D is really important for us. And it taps into, creativity, people skills, the kind of things that Ireland and Canada have a lot in common on. So, yeah, I think it's just finding those niches, putting the right people together, and exploiting the opportunities that are presented by CETA. I suppose one of the advantages for Canadian businesses is that CETA opens up the way to Europe. There's probably a natural default for Canadian companies to think the natural market is the United States. But like Ireland, I think Canada and Canadian businesses now looking to diversify. So a very obvious place to go is to look to Europe. Very stable regimes. In Ireland, we have a very pro-business environment, English speaking, based on kind of common law. I think we're the only system now in the European Union based on common law, and as I say, very very pro-business, great place to do business. But the main thing, for Canadian businesses is the quality of the Irish workforce. Very flexible, in one of the highest productivity rates in Europe, very creative. And we've seen foreign investment companies come into Ireland, and people have joined those companies and moved up to the ranks because there's just a natural talent in Ireland. And we have the infrastructure as well, and the innovation. So there's a lot of opportunities there to explore, and I'm looking forward to helping that in any way we can. Enterprise Ireland, which is the state agency responsible for developing our Indigenous companies, is now based in Toronto, with Neil Cooney heading the office there. We have the IDA established also in Toronto, attracting in investment from Canada with Deirdre Moore. So that's our kind of Team Ireland, along with my other colleagues here. So yeah, we're interested in finding those connections, and of course, you know, it's the Irish in Canada that often open the door for us. And you know,
Yes,
listen, being Irish just means you get a welcome. You know, in Canada,
exactly.
you know, there's
Yes.
a resonance there. Yeah,
And there's a huge Irish diaspora to draw on as well.
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Is there a timeline for the new Irish consulate planned in Toronto? Has that been established yet?
No, there's a commitment there, and you know, we're keen to advance that. But you know, we've opened up, I think, 10 new missions over the last number of years under Global Ireland. So but it is a demanding logistical project, as it were. But we'll be certainly hoping to keep it at top of the agenda, you know. But there's no set timeline just yet.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ambassador McKee. This was very informative, and I look forward to speaking to you again in future. Thank you.